I never thought I'd be the type to cheat. Honestly, I always rolled my eyes at those women on reality TV who threw away perfectly good marriages because they were bored or whatever. Yet here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, not the granite countertop island I used to have, but a wobbly IKEA thing, clipping coupons while my ex-husband lives in a beachfront mansion. I'm Erica, 33, and this is how I blew up my life because I couldn't appreciate what was right in front of me. 7 years ago, I thought I had it made when I married Sean. He wasn't exactly rolling in money, but he had ambition, and this tech startup idea he wouldn't shut up about. Back then, I'd smile and nod whenever he'd go on about algorithms and market disruption over dinner. What I really cared about was that he had potential, the kind my mom always told me to look for in a man. The first few years were decent enough. We bought a starter home in a neighborhood that wasn't my first choice but had good bones, according to the realtor. Sean converted the spare bedroom into his home office, covering the walls with whiteboards filled with code and business plans. I took a part-time admin job at a local insurance office, more to have something to do than because we needed the money. My paycheck was mine. Shopping, girls' nights, spa days, while Sean covered the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and investments in his precious business. That's when things started feeling stale. Sean worked constantly, hunched over his laptop until 2 or 3 in the morning. When I'd complain about feeling neglected, he'd promise things would change once the business took off. "We're building our future," he'd say, like that was supposed to make me feel better about eating dinner alone 4 nights a week. Meanwhile, my friend Melissa was posting photos from Cabo with her husband, who worked half as hard as Sean, but somehow managed to afford twice the lifestyle. Each scroll through my feed made our IKEA furniture and sensible sedan feel more like a prison than a home. When I'd point this out to Sean, suggesting maybe he needed to focus more on our present than some hypothetical future, he'd get this hurt look. "Do you think I enjoy missing dinner? Missing time with you? I'm doing this for us, say." But was he really? Because from where I stood, it seemed like he was doing it for himself, for the thrill of building something while I was stuck running our household like his personal assistant. I'd make his coffee, schedule his dentist appointments, and even remind him to call his mother on her birthday, all while he chased his startup dreams and I vacuumed around his discarded energy drink cans. In public, I was the supportive wife. "Sean's working on something really innovative," I'd tell our friends at dinner parties, placing my hand on his arm just so. But at home, the resentment festered. "Another late night? Shocking," I'd mutter when he'd crawl into bed at 3 a.m., or I'd accidentally vacuum during his important video calls. I should mention that I wasn't always like this. When we first met at a friend's housewarming party, I was genuinely captivated by Sean's passion. He talked about technology with this sparkle in his eyes, and I found it sexy how dedicated he was to his vision. I even defended him to my parents when they asked if he had real job security. But somewhere along the way, that admiration curdled into resentment. His dedication stopped seeming sexy and started feeling like rejection. Looking back, I can see I was testing him, pushing to see how much he'd take before putting me first. The problem was, Sean wasn't playing the game. He'd apologize sincerely, try to make it up with breakfast in bed on Sundays, but then go right back to work mode by noon. He wasn't fighting for my attention. He assumed it was a given, that our marriage was solid while he temporarily focused elsewhere. That's when Daniel started at the insurance office. He was the new sales director, confident, attentive, and most importantly, present in a way Sean hadn't been for years. When I'd mention Melissa's Cabo trip, Daniel wouldn't defend Sean's work ethic like our friends did. Instead, he'd say things like, "A man should know how to balance ambition with keeping his woman happy." Music to my ears. The flirting started innocently enough, coffee breaks where he'd remember exactly how I took my latte, text messages about office gossip that gradually became more personal. I found myself checking my appearance before our morning meetings, wearing the perfume that had been collecting dust since Sean stopped noticing. When Daniel invited me to happy hour after work, I told Sean I was going out with the girls. He barely looked up from his computer, just reminding me to text when I was on my way home. The fact that he didn't question it, didn't show a flicker of jealousy, somehow made me even more resentful. Didn't he care enough to wonder? To worry another man might find me attractive? One happy hour turned into regular work events and girls' nights that were neither. Daniel made me feel desirable again, leaning in when I spoke like every word mattered. When his hand first brushed mine across the table, I didn't pull away. When he kissed me in his car, I kissed him back, harder than I'd kissed anyone in years. The guilt came in waves, usually late at night when I'd look at Sean sleeping beside me. His face peaceful, despite the stress I knew he carried. But I'd push it away by remembering how he'd forgotten our anniversary, or how he'd missed my cousin's wedding for an investor meeting. In my mind, I wasn't betraying him. He'd betrayed me first by breaking the promise of what our marriage should have been. Keeping track of my lies became a part-time job itself. I created a separate email account for messages with Daniel. I'd delete texts immediately after reading them. I even started keeping a secret credit card in my maiden name for hotel charges, hidden in a tampons box. Sean would never touch. Daniel wasn't even that special, if I'm being honest. He was just there, available, interested. He'd compliment my outfits and laugh at my jokes. He'd send thinking of you texts randomly throughout the day. Once, when I mentioned offhand that I loved orchids, he had one delivered to the office. It wasn't the grand gesture that mattered, it was the simple fact that he'd remembered something about me, something personal that had nothing to do with his business goals. When Sean would question why I was coming home late or why our joint account seemed lower than usual, I'd flip the script. "Why are you monitoring me? Don't you trust me?" I'd snap, watching him backpedal, watching doubt cloud his eyes. "This is exactly why I need space sometimes. You're suffocating me." He'd apologize and I'd feel simultaneously powerful and hollow. The worst part? I'd use things he'd confided in me against him. Once, early in our relationship, Sean had admitted his ex had cheated on him, how it had destroyed his self-confidence for years. I couldn't trust my instincts afterward, he'd told me. Now, when he'd express concern about my changing behavior, I'd throw that back at him. "Are you projecting your insecurities onto me? That's not fair, Sean." Watching him doubt himself became perversely satisfying. For 6 months, I lived this double life. With Daniel, I was the vivacious, underappreciated woman whose boring husband didn't deserve her. With friends, I was the supportive wife patiently waiting for Sean's business to take off. At home, I was increasingly distant, making Sean work harder for even basic conversation. I should have known something was off when Sean stopped asking where I was going. At the time, I thought I'd finally trained him to give me space. I felt victorious, like I'd won some unspoken competition. In reality, he was quietly gathering evidence, preparing for a confrontation I never saw coming. There were signs, looking back. The way he'd started password protecting his computer, how he'd take phone calls in the backyard instead of his office. I even caught him quickly closing a spreadsheet when I walked in once, but I was so caught up in my own deception that I never considered he might be onto mine. The night everything imploded wasn't marked by dramatic screaming or plate throwing. It was terrifyingly calm. I came home from what I'd claimed was a team-building dinner, actually a night at Daniel's apartment, and found Sean at the kitchen table with a folder and a glass of whiskey. "Sit down, Erica," he said, his voice steady in a way that sent chills down my spine. I played innocent, asking if everything was all right with the business. He didn't answer directly, just opened the folder and laid out hotel receipts, screenshots of texts I thought I'd deleted. Turns out our cloud accounts were synced, and, most damning, photos of Daniel and me entering and leaving hotels on days I'd claimed to be elsewhere. "I've suspected for months," he said flatly, "but I needed to be sure before making any decisions." My first instinct was denial. "These could be anyone," I scoffed, though my hands were shaking as I pushed the photos back toward him. "The credit card statements are in your name, Erica. The times align perfectly with your supposed girls' nights. There's no scenario where this isn't exactly what it looks like." When denial failed, I switched to tears, a tactic that had always worked before. I cried about feeling neglected, about how his business had come before me for years. "You drove me to this," I sobbed. "What did you expect when you're never here?" For the first time, my tears didn't soften him. He just waited until I ran out of steam, then said, "I've spoken with a lawyer. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. You have 3 days to find somewhere else to stay." "You can't just kick me out of my own house," I shouted, panic rising. "Our house," he corrected. "The house I paid for while you spent your money on hotels with Daniel. Check the deed, it's in my name." That night, as I frantically packed a suitcase, I still believed I could fix things. Sean was angry now, but he'd calm down. He'd remember our history, how good we were together before his startup consumed him. I'd end things with Daniel, promise to try harder. We'd get counseling, rebuild trust. It was just a matter of weathering the storm. I couldn't have been more wrong. The divorce papers arrived by courier 2 days later at my friend's apartment where I was staying. Reading through them felt like being doused in ice water. Sean wasn't just ending our marriage, he was cutting me off completely, protected by agreements I barely remembered signing. Early in our marriage, when Sean's business was first taking shape, he'd asked me to sign papers that would protect our future. I'd skimmed them while watching TV, annoyed at the interruption. Those papers, it turned out, included a postnuptial agreement specifying that his business and its assets remained his sole property in the event of divorce, especially divorce resulting from infidelity. When I called Sean screaming about how he'd tricked me, he responded with eerie composure. "You should have read what you were signing, Erica. I didn't trick you. I protected myself." I hired a lawyer, convinced I could challenge the agreement, get half of everything, including his precious business. My lawyer, after reviewing the documents, gave me the unvarnished truth. "This postnup is ironclad. Given the documented infidelity, you're lucky he's offering the settlement he is." That generous settlement? 3 months of living expenses and our second car. No alimony, no ongoing support, nothing from the business I'd suffered through for years. When I tried arguing that I'd supported him emotionally, my lawyer laughed. "The judge won't care about emotional support when there are pictures of you entering hotels with another man." What hurt most wasn't losing Sean. It was losing the lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to. The house I'd decorated, the neighborhood I'd established connections in, the financial security that let me work part-time while spending without worry. I'd taken all of it for granted, assuming it was my right, rather than a privilege built on mutual trust. I thought my friends would rally around me, but Sean had been methodical there too. He didn't bash me publicly or turn them against me with emotional pleas. He simply showed select people the evidence. My texts arranging meetups with Daniel, receipts from dinners on nights I'd claimed to be with the girls. Those same girls were now ignoring my calls, their loyalty evaporating when they realized I'd used them as alibis. Even Daniel disappeared when things got messy. Turns out, he wasn't interested in being dragged into divorce proceedings or supporting me financially. "This has been fun," he texted, "but it's getting complicated. I think we should cool things off." Just like that, I'd lost my marriage, my backup plan, and most of my friends in one catastrophic cascade. The divorce was finalized in record time. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment that cost twice what our mortgage had been, forced to take a full-time position at the insurance company, awkwardly working alongside office mates who knew exactly why my marriage had imploded. For the first time in years, I had to budget, to think twice before ordering takeout or buying new clothes. Meanwhile, Sean seemed to vanish from my life completely. Our mutual friends stopped mentioning him around me. His social media went quiet, then private. It was as if he'd decided that completely erasing me from his life was the best revenge. I tried dating again after a few months, mostly to prove to myself I was still desirable. There were a few men who seemed promising at first, a pharmaceutical rep, a divorced attorney, but none stuck around long. I'd made a habit of looking for what men could provide rather than who they were, and that approach doesn't lead to lasting connections. Plus, I had trust issues now. If Sean could meticulously gather evidence against me for months while seeming oblivious, how could I trust anyone's facade? I convinced myself he must be struggling too. His business had always been on shaky ground, and surely the emotional toll of our divorce would impact his work. I pictured him in our old house, eating microwave dinners, finally realizing what he'd lost when he chose his startup over me. This narrative kept me going through those first lean months of independence. Then came the turning point. 3 years after our divorce, I was standing in line at the pharmacy, a stack of coupons clutched in my hand, something I'd once mocked budget shoppers for, when I overheard 2 women talking behind me. "Did you see that profile on Sean Ellis in Tech Innovator magazine? 30 under 40 list, $8 million acquisition deal." My heart stopped. They had to be talking about a different Sean Ellis. My Sean's business had been struggling, barely breaking even when we were together. But no, when I frantically searched online that evening, there he was. My ex-husband in a crisp button-down, standing in sleek office space I didn't recognize, quoted about his company's groundbreaking approach that had caught the attention of a major tech firm. The same business I'd called his hobby and complained took too much of his time had just made him a multimillionaire. The article mentioned he'd worked tirelessly for years, often round the clock, to develop the technology. Those late nights I'd resented, the investor meetings I'd sulked about him attending, they'd all led to this windfall I would have shared in if I'd just been patient. If I'd been supportive instead of critical. If I hadn't been so damn bored. I spent hours stalking every online mention of him I could find. A business podcast where he briefly mentioned personal challenges during development but credited them with making him more focused. A charity gala photo showing him with a woman I didn't recognize, tall, elegant, with an MD after her name in the caption. Apparently his new girlfriend was a pediatric surgeon. The worst part? In one interview, when asked what drove him during the difficult early years, he mentioned, "I had something to prove, to myself and others who didn't believe in the vision." I knew, with sickening certainty, that I was one of those others. My dismissal of his work, my constant complaints about his schedule, they hadn't deterred him. They'd fueled him. Against my better judgment, I reached out. A casual email congratulating him on his success, mentioning that, despite everything, I always believed in you, a bald-faced lie, and suggesting we catch up sometime, a thinly veiled attempt to reinsert myself into his now wealthy life. His response was polite, brief, and devastating in its finality. "Thank you for the congratulations, Erica. I hope you're doing well. Take care." No openings, no hint of lingering feelings, not even anger I could use as a foothold to climb back into his life. I tried once more with a more direct approach. "I've been thinking about us a lot lately. Maybe we could grab coffee? I think we ended things with too much left unsaid." This time, his response took 3 days, and when it came, it was clear someone, probably the doctor girlfriend, had helped craft it. "Erica, our marriage ended because of choices you made, not because of things left unsaid. I've moved forward with my life and suggest you do the same. I wish you the best, but I'm not interested in meeting." And that was it. The door didn't just close, it vanished altogether, leaving me staring at a blank wall. Today, 4 years post-divorce, I'm still at the same insurance company, though I've moved up to office manager. My apartment is decent, if small. I date occasionally, keeping an eye out for men with potential, though I've learned to be less obvious about it. I maintain a carefully curated social media presence that suggests I'm doing better than I am. Weekend getaways that stretch my credit card to its limit, restaurant meals I eat once a month but post photos of weekly. Sometimes I see updates about Sean. The acquisition deal turned into a leadership role at the parent company. The doctor girlfriend became the doctor wife. They bought a beach house, in addition to their main residence. They started a foundation supporting young tech entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Every such update feels like a paper cut across my heart. Not because I miss him, exactly. I've been honest enough with myself to recognize our marriage was troubled long before Daniel. What haunts me is the knowledge that I could have been part of that success story. I could be the one hosting charity galas, instead of scanning the clearance racks at Target. The worst moments are when I catch myself playing the what-if game. What if I'd been more patient? What if I'd viewed his long hours as investment in our future, rather than rejection of our present? What if I'd respected his ambition instead of resenting it? Would I be in that beach house now, wearing designer clothes instead of knockoffs, planning vacations instead of budgeting groceries? But here's the thing. I'm not sure I would have done anything differently. even knowing the outcome. That's the ugly truth I don't share in my sanitized retellings. Even if I could go back, I'd probably still feel bored, still crave validation, still make the same selfish choices. Because at my core, I wanted someone who would make me the center of their universe, not someone who asked me to orbit alongside them while they pursued a bigger vision. When people ask what happened to my marriage, I have a practiced response: we grew apart. His work became his whole identity, and I needed more than that. It sounds reasonable, mature even. Nobody needs to know about Daniel, or the hotels, or how I systematically undermined the very man I'd promised to support. Sometimes I wonder if Sean ever truly loved me, or if I was just conveniently there when he needed someone to believe in him. But then I remember how he looked at me on our wedding day, the genuine hurt in his eyes during our arguments, and I know the truth. He did love me, I just couldn't recognize it because it didn't look the way I thought it should. The irony doesn't escape me. I cheated because I was bored, because I wanted excitement and validation. Now my life is a monotonous struggle to maintain appearances while stretching my paycheck to cover basic necessities. Meanwhile, Sean's life, the one I found so tediously focused on work, has become exactly the adventure I always wanted. Last week, I was at the grocery store, scrutinizing my coupons while the cashier waited impatiently. The woman behind me in line was scrolling through her phone, and I caught a glimpse of her screen. She was looking at photos from some charity gala. There in the background of one shot was Sean with his doctor wife, both laughing at something off camera. They looked genuinely happy, comfortable in their success and with each other. For just a moment, I felt something besides envy, a flicker of genuine gladness that he'd found happiness after what I put him through. But that sentiment quickly drowned under the familiar wave of self-pity. That could have been me in the photo. Should have been me. If there's a lesson here, it's not the one from fairy tales where the cheater gets their comeuppance and learns the value of honesty. It's more complicated and far less satisfying. I didn't become a better person through my mistakes. I just became a more calculating one. I didn't learn to value loyalty. I learned to regret getting caught. The real tragedy isn't that I'm clipping coupons while Sean enjoys his millions. It's that even now, faced with the consequences of my actions, I'm more upset about missing out on his success than about betraying someone who loved me. I don't miss Sean. I miss the lifestyle his success would have given me. So here I sit, sorting coupons by expiration date, planning my grocery trip with military precision to stretch my dollars. Meanwhile, the man whose dreams I mocked is living the life I always felt entitled to. Not because fate is cruel or karma is real, but because he worked for it while I looked for shortcuts. I cheated because I was bored in my marriage. Now he's worth $8 million, and I shop with coupons. It's not a morality tale, it's just the math of poor decisions compounded over time.